I wish I could tell you this started with something dramatic, like a screaming match or a property dispute gone wrong. But no, it started with a handshake, a smile, and a guy pretending to be polite. And somehow, that turned into him erasing a piece of my life while I was halfway across the world. So picture this. I'm on a flight back from Egypt, exhausted, sand still in my shoes, already thinking about getting home, checking on my land, making sure everything's running like it always does, because my place isn't just a house. It's 18 acres of hilltop land I've been taking care of since 2006, and at the center of it all sat this old stone water tower my grandfather built with his own hands. And I mean built, not decorative, not some cute countryside relic. This thing powered everything. Gravity-fed system, clean pressure, supplied my house, my irrigation lines, even the livestock troughs. It was the backbone of the entire property. Now here's where things get interesting, because nobody, and I mean nobody, had ever questioned where my land ended. Not for years. Not until a couple from out of state showed up. Their names were Derek and Lila Whitmore, Boston money, city energy, the kind of people who buy country homes, but still complain about bugs existing. They picked up the estate next door, and right away, you could feel it. That subtle shift, like they weren't just moving in, they were upgrading the neighborhood in their own minds. The first time I met Derek, I was out by the tower early one morning, checking the pump housing. He walked up like he owned the hill already. Clean shoes, pressed shirt, that tight smile people use when they're pretending to be friendly but are already judging you. He goes, "Hey there, I've been meaning to ask, what is that structure?" I told him straight, "It's my water tower. Been here longer than both of us. Keeps the whole place running." He nodded, slow, looking it up and down like he was evaluating a piece of furniture he might return. Then he goes, "Interesting, seems a bit prominent." Prominent. Yeah, that word stuck with me. But I didn't think much of it at the time. I'd lived there long enough to know. People talk, they adjust, they move on. Or at least, that's what I thought. Fast forward about 10 weeks. I've been overseas the whole time. No calls, no warnings, no complaints filed, nothing. I pull into my driveway just before sunset, engine still ticking as it cools, and something feels off immediately. You ever get that feeling where your brain notices something before you consciously do? Like a missing tooth in a smile you've seen 1,000 times? That's what it was. I step out of the truck, look up toward the ridge, and my stomach just drops. Because the tower, the one thing you could see from anywhere on the property, was gone. Not damaged. Not partially dismantled. Gone. All that was left was rubble. Broken stones scattered like someone had taken a hammer to history. Copper piping ripped out. The base completely torn apart like it had never existed in the first place. And in that moment, everything clicked. Not confusion. Not panic. Clarity. I already knew who did it. So I pulled out my phone and called Derek. He answered on the second ring. Calm. Casual. Like I was calling to borrow a tool. I said, "You tore down my water tower." No greeting. No build-up. Just that. And he goes, "I swear to you." He goes, "Oh yeah, that thing." That thing. I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept it together. That thing supplied water to my entire property. My house, my fields, my livestock, all of it. And then he hits me with this. Well, we honestly thought it was abandoned. And frankly, it was kind of an eyesore. It blocked the view from our upper deck. Blocked. There. View. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because sometimes your brain just refuses to process that level of entitlement in real time. I said, "It's on my land. Fully functional. I have surveys, permits, water rights, everything." And that's when his tone changed. Not defensive, not apologetic, just cold. He goes, "Look, our consultant reviewed the property lines, and from what we were told, that structure was affecting our property value. It's gone now. If you think there's an issue, you can take it up legally. You can take it up legally." That's when I realized this wasn't a mistake. This was a decision. A calculated one. Because nobody hires a demolition crew, brings in equipment, dismantles a full stone structure, strips out copper, and clears the site without planning it. And they did all of that while I was out of the country. No conversation. No notice. No hesitation. Just erase it. So I hung up the phone, stood there for a minute, looking at what used to be my grandfather's tower, and I made one decision. If they wanted to play this like a game, I was going to play it better. All right, let's pause the story for a second, because what Derek did here, This isn't just rude neighbor behavior. This is where things cross into territory people seriously underestimate. According to standard procedure, you do not, under any circumstance, alter, damage, or remove a structure unless you are 100% certain it is on your property and you have documented authority to act. Not, your consultant said. Not, it looks like it might be yours. I'm talking certified survey, permits, and usually written notice. Anything less than that, you're gambling, and the stakes are high. From a legal perspective, what Derek did checks multiple boxes at once: trespass, destruction of property, and interference with essential infrastructure. And that last one, that's the big one. Because this wasn't some decorative shed or an old fence. This was a functional water system. Courts don't treat that lightly. You're not just talking about replacement cost, you're talking about operational loss, dependency damage, sometimes even punitive penalties depending on intent. And here's where it gets interesting. This is a psychological trap a lot of people with money and control tendencies fall into. Derek didn't see the tower as infrastructure. He saw it as an inconvenience. Something ugly that disrupted his version of what the land should look like. When people frame things that way, they start justifying actions that are completely out of bounds. Because in their mind, they're fixing a problem, not creating one. Add in a consultant, someone who probably gave a vague or overly confident opinion, and suddenly Derek feels backed by authority. That's how you get reckless decisions dressed up as reasonable ones. And the timing? That wasn't random either. Acting while I was out of the country, that suggests awareness. Not confusion, awareness. Because if you truly believe you're in the right, you don't wait until the other party is gone to make your move. The lesson here is simple, and a lot of people learn it too late. Property lines are not suggestions, and "I thought it was mine" is not a defense that holds up when real damage is done. Now, with that in mind, let's get back to what happened next, because this is where things stop being one-sided. So after that call, I didn't waste time arguing, didn't go back and forth, didn't try to work it out, because at that point, you're not dealing with a misunderstanding, you're dealing with someone who already decided they're right. And people like that, they don't respond to logic, they respond to consequences. I called my attorney, not some random firm, but a guy named Marcus Hale. Old school, sharp, the kind of attorney who doesn't raise his voice because he doesn't have to. I told him everything. The tower, the call, the demolition, and before I even finished, he just goes, "Do you have the survey?" I said, "Not just a survey. I've got 3 over the years." He pauses, then says, "Good. Then this is going to be very straightforward." And that word, straightforward, hit different, because up until that moment, everything felt chaotic. But he saw it like math. Within 24 hours, Marcus had everything pulled: property surveys, water rights documentation, infrastructure valuation, even historical records showing the tower had been in continuous use for years. Not abandoned, not decorative, essential. Then he put a number on it. $310,000. That's what it would cost to rebuild the tower, restore the system, and compensate for the disruption. And honestly, that was conservative. We sent Derek a formal demand letter, clean, direct, no emotion. 7 days to pay in full, or we escalate. Now here's the part that really tells you who you're dealing with. Instead of calling, instead of trying to fix it, Derek had his lawyer respond. And the offer? $12,000. $12,000 to assist with drilling a new well. I remember reading that letter twice, not because it was complicated, but because I genuinely couldn't believe someone would reduce a fully functioning, generational water system down to the cost of a basic well install like it was some kind of backyard upgrade. It wasn't just low, it was dismissive. And that's when Marcus looked at me and said, "All right, we're done negotiating." He filed immediately: infrastructure destruction, property damage, full liability. But he didn't stop there. He added something else, something I didn't even know was an option at the time. Equivalent remedy, which basically means if someone destroys something of value on your property, the court can authorize you to remove something of equal value from theirs. Not revenge. Balance. Now, while all of this is moving through the system, Derek does something that, to this day, still amazes me. He doubles down. Instead of backing off, he hires architects, brings in contractors, and starts building this sleek, glass observation room right on the ridge. And I mean right on it. The same ridge where my tower used to stand. On my land. So I walk over there one afternoon, watch the frame going up, and I tell him straight, "You're building on my property." And he doesn't even flinch. He just shrugs and goes. My attorney cleared it. At that point, I didn't argue. Because when someone is that committed to being wrong, the best thing you can do is let them continue. 9 weeks later, we're in court. No theatrics. No long speeches. Just evidence. Marcus lays everything out. Surveys, photos, system diagrams, cost assessments. Clean. Precise. Derek's side tries to argue aesthetics, property value, reasonable belief, all the usual angles. Didn't matter. The judge, older guy, no patience for nonsense, looks through the file, takes a moment, then just says, "The evidence is conclusive," and the room goes quiet. He continues, "The structure in question was located entirely within the plaintiff's property boundaries and served as essential infrastructure. The defendant acted without verified authority and caused substantial loss." Then he says the part that changed everything. The plaintiff is authorized to remove structures belonging to the defendant equivalent to the assessed damages. Execution may proceed immediately. Immediately. Not within 30 days. Not pending review. Immediately. I didn't even sit down after that. I walked out of the courthouse, called Marcus to confirm, then made one more call. To a demolition contractor named Ray Collins, guy I'd worked with years back, reliable, efficient, doesn't ask unnecessary questions. I told him, "I need a crew. Today." He goes, "What are we taking down?" I said, "Something worth about 300 grand. By that afternoon, we were on Derek's property. Legally. Paperwork in hand. Crew ready. Marcus showed up to oversee everything. Not because it was required, but because when things get this serious, you want zero mistakes. We even notified the municipal utilities office beforehand. Last thing I needed was someone claiming we disrupted shared systems. Everything was clean, controlled, authorized. And the target? Derek's pride and joy. An infinity pool overlooking the valley, glass edge, custom lighting, heating system, imported stone deck. The kind of thing you build when you want people to know you have money. Yeah, that didn't last long. The crew moved in like clockwork, equipment rolling, hydraulic breakers firing up, the sound echoing across the hill. Glass panels shattered first, sharp, clean cracks that spiderwebbed instantly. Then the decking, lifted, broken, torn apart piece by piece. They drained the pool, ripped out the filtration system, disconnected heating lines, pulled the lighting fixtures, and once the structure was exposed, they went deeper. Excavation. Foundation removal. By the end of day 1, it already looked like a construction site in reverse. By day 2, it was gone. Not damaged. Not partially removed. Gone. Like it had never been there. And right in the middle of that second day, Derek and Lila pull up. You ever see someone realize, in real time, that they've made a catastrophic mistake? Because Derek stepped out of that car, looked at what used to be his pool, and just froze. Color drained from his face. Then came the shouting. "What the hell do you think you're doing? This is destruction of property. I'm calling my lawyer. I'm filing federal charges. You're done." He was pacing, yelling, pointing at the crew like he could stop machinery with outrage alone. So I walked over, calm, reached into my folder, and handed him the court order. He snatched it, scanned it, and I watched his expression shift. Anger, confusion, then something else. Realization. I said, "The court authorized equivalent removal. Your pool was assessed at $310,000, same as my tower." And just like that, the energy changed. Because for the first time since this started, he wasn't in control anymore. So after that phone call, I didn't go back and forth, didn't argue, didn't try to reason with Derek. Because at that point, you're not dealing with someone confused, you're dealing with someone who already decided they're entitled to be right. And once someone locks into that mindset, logic just becomes background noise. I called my attorney, different kind of guy. Name was Daniel Cross, calm voice, sharp mind, the type who listens more than he talks. I laid everything out, the tower, the timeline, the call, the rubble. And the first thing he asked wasn't emotional. It was surgical. "Do you have a certified boundary survey?" I told him, "Yeah. Multiple. Updated." He paused, then said, "All right, then this isn't complicated. It's just going to be expensive for him." And that right there, that was the shift. Because up until then, I was still processing what happened. He was already calculating the outcome. Within a day, Daniel had everything lined up: surveys, property records, documentation of the water system, even valuation reports. And let me tell you, when you break something like that down on paper, it stops being an old tower real quick. It becomes infrastructure. It becomes dependency. It becomes liability. The number we landed on? $310,000. That's what it would take to rebuild the tower, restore the system, and cover the loss of function. Not inflated. Not exaggerated. Just real cost. So we sent Derek a demand letter, clean, professional, no threats, just facts. 7 days to make it right, or we escalate legally. Now here's where you really start to understand the kind of person he is. Because instead of picking up the phone, instead of trying to settle, he had his lawyer respond. And the offer? $12,000. $12,000, framed as assistance for drilling a well. I remember just staring at that number. Not even angry at first, just confused. Because it told me something very clear. He didn't see what he destroyed as valuable. Which meant he still didn't understand what was coming. Daniel looked at me, folded the letter, and said, "We're done negotiating." And that's when things moved fast. He filed for full damages, destruction of property, interference with essential systems. But then he added something I hadn't even considered: equivalent remedy. Now, if you've never heard that term before, it basically means the court can allow a balancing action. Not revenge, not punishment, balance. If someone destroys something of measurable value, you can be authorized to remove something of equal value from them. And while all of that was moving through the system, Derek made what I can only describe as a catastrophic decision. He didn't pause. He didn't wait. He doubled down. He brought in architects, contractors, and started building this high-end glass observation room right along the ridge. And yeah, exactly where my tower used to stand. On my land. So I walked over there one afternoon, framing already going up, workers moving like nothing was wrong, and I told him straight, "You're building on my property." And he just looks at me, completely unfazed, and goes, "My attorney cleared it." No hesitation. No doubt. That's the thing about confidence. When it's built on bad information, it doesn't feel any different from being right. So I didn't argue. I didn't try to stop him. Because at that point, the best move wasn't resistance. It was patience. 9 weeks later, we're in court. No drama. No shouting. Just evidence. Daniel presents everything: surveys, photos, system schematics, valuation reports. Clean, structured, undeniable. Derek's side tries to pivot, calls it an eyesore, claims reasonable belief, talks about property value, aesthetics. None of it sticks. The judge, older, no nonsense, flips through the file, pauses, and then just says, "The evidence is conclusive." And the room goes still. He continues, "The structure was located entirely within the plaintiff's property and served a functional purpose. The defendant acted without verified authority and caused measurable loss." Then comes the line that changes everything. The plaintiff is authorized to remove structures belonging to the defendant equivalent to the assessed damages. Execution may proceed immediately. Immediately. That word echoed. Because that meant no delay. No waiting period. No second round. I walked out of that courtroom and didn't even sit down. I called Daniel to confirm. Then made one more call. To a demolition contractor named Victor Hale, solid guy, runs a tight crew, doesn't cut corners. I told him, "I need you today." He asked, "What are we taking down?" I said, "Something worth $300,000. By that afternoon, we were on Derek's property. Legally. Paperwork in hand. Crew ready. Daniel was there too, overseeing everything, making sure every step stayed within the order. We even notified local utilities ahead of time. No loose ends, no technical violations, nothing they could use against us later. Everything airtight. And the target? Derek's infinity pool. And not just any pool. This thing was luxury on display. Glass edge design, built into the slope, custom lighting, heating system, imported stone. The kind of setup you don't just use, you show off. Yeah, that was the number. The crew got to work immediately, machines firing up, the sound carrying across the hill. First, the glass edge. One clean impact, then fractures spreading like cracks in ice. Panels shattered, falling inward. Then the deck, sections lifted, broken apart, hauled away piece by piece. They drained the water, stripped out the filtration system, disconnected heating lines, pulled wiring, removed lighting fixtures. And once everything above ground was gone, they went deeper. Excavation equipment moved in, digging into the foundation, tearing out the base structure until there was nothing left to support. By the end of day 1, it already looked like something had gone very, very wrong. By day 2, it looked like it had never existed. Gone. Completely cleared. And right in the middle of that second day, Derek and Lila pulled up. He stepped out of the car, looked at the site, and just froze. I mean, completely still. Like his brain needed a second to catch up to reality. Then it hit him, and the yelling started. "What do you think you're doing? This is illegal. This is destruction of property. I'm calling my lawyer. I'm filing lawsuits. You're finished." He was pacing, pointing, shouting at the crew like volume alone could reverse what was happening. So I walked over, calm, reached into my folder, and handed him the court order. He grabbed it, scanned it quickly, and I watched his face change. Anger, confusion, then something else. "Understanding," I said. "Court authorized equivalent removal. Your pool was assessed at $310,000, same as my tower." And right there, everything flipped. Because for the first time since this started, he realized this wasn't a situation he could talk his way out of. So that should have been the end of it. Right, balance restored, lesson learned, everyone goes home a little quieter than before. Yeah, not quite. Because people like Derek don't just accept consequences, they try to reframe them. A week after the demolition, I get served papers. He's suing me, claiming malicious destruction of property, emotional distress, loss of enjoyment, the whole package. And honestly, I wasn't surprised. When someone loses control, the first instinct isn't reflection, it's retaliation. But here's the thing, and this is where reality starts to separate from ego. The court had already spoken. We went back in, same judge, same courtroom, and this time, it didn't take long. The judge reviewed the filing, looked at the previous order, and shut it down almost immediately. No drawn-out arguments, no dramatic speeches, just a clean rejection. And then came the part Derek definitely didn't expect. He was ordered to cover my legal fees, plus an additional $89,000. So now, not only had he lost the pool, not only had he failed to avoid paying for the tower, he ended up deeper in the hole than if he had just handled it correctly from the start. And that's really where this whole story lands. Because on the surface, it looks like a revenge story, like some satisfying back and forth where one guy gets even. But if you look a little closer, it's not about revenge at all. It's about escalation. It's about what happens when someone confuses ownership with authority and confidence with correctness. The lesson here is small decisions, especially the ones made out of ego, tend to grow teeth over time. Derek didn't wake up one morning planning to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. He made a series of smaller choices, ignoring boundaries, trusting the wrong advice, dismissing someone else's rights, and each one stacked on top of the last until there was no easy way out. And from a practical standpoint, this is where a lot of people get blindsided. Property law isn't flexible just because something feels inconvenient. That ugly structure, that blocked view, none of that matters if it's legally protected and functionally necessary. More importantly, acting without verification is one of the fastest ways to turn a manageable issue into a financial disaster. Surveys exist for a reason. Documentation exists for a reason. And if you skip those steps, you're not saving time, you're borrowing trouble. There's also a human side to this that people don't talk about enough. This is a psychological trap, where someone starts believing their perspective is the default reality. Derek didn't think he was doing something extreme. In his mind, he was improving his environment. And once you start thinking like that, you stop asking for permission, you stop checking boundaries, because you've already justified the outcome. That's how people cross lines without even realizing how far they've gone, until something pushes back. And when it does, it usually pushes back harder than expected. Now, me personally, I didn't walk away from this feeling victorious. Relieved, sure. Validated, maybe, but not victorious. Because at the end of the day, something that had stood on my land for decades, something my grandfather built, was still gone. And no court order, no payout, no equivalent removal really replaces that. What it does do is remind you how important it is to protect what's yours, not just physically, but legally. To know your boundaries, to document your assets, and to never assume the other person is going to act reasonably just because you would. Because sometimes they won't. And when that happens, The only thing that stands between you and a loss like this is whether or not you're prepared. So yeah, that's the story. Now I'm curious, what would you have done in that situation? Would you have tried to settle early or gone all the way like I did? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, real situations, real consequences, hit subscribe.